stage in 2021, you may not have realised, but during this year, there were Olympic Games. The most important sporting event in the world was held in one of the most fascinating cities in the world, Tokyo, the capital of manga, samurai, and sushi. None of that was enough to get your attention. And it's not just me saying it, the data says it too.
NBC's Tokyo 2020 audience lowest since 1988 Olympics.
The drop in audiences has been catastrophic. Globally, it ranges from between 25 and 30%. But here on VisualPolitik, we wonder what exactly is the real fascination with the Olympic Games. Just a few years ago, the Olympic Games were the wet dream of any leader. It seemed an absolute truth that hosting the Olympic Games was the best thing that could happen to put your country on the map. The Barcelona 1992 Olympic Games served to show that Spain was a modern and democratic country. Beijing in 2008 showed the power of new China. However, Tokyo 2021 has shown Japan's worst shame. And no, it's not just that the coronavirus threw a spanner in the works, it's that it is really a failure whichever way you look at it. Check this out.
Oxford study. Tokyo Olympics are the most costly summer games.
Those of you who follow VisualPolitik, and why would you not, will remember that 2 years ago we predicted right here on this channel that Tokyo 2020 was going to be a bust. And that was when we thought that, at the very least, Tokyo would get a few extra tourists. But with the coronavirus pandemic, Japan had to close the doors to the country. So they've had 0 tourists. Zilch. Nothing at all. So the question is, to what extent have the games been a catastrophe for Japan? And will we see political consequences? And what affects us all most closely? Are we looking at the end of the Olympic Games as we know them? Today, on VisualPolitik, we're going to answer all of these questions. But first, let's look at some history.
Maboroshi no Olimpiku, Phantom Olympics.
Tokyo has a love-hate relationship with the Olympics. We are talking about one great success and too many disappointments. You see, over the course of history, the Tokyo has bid for the Olympics 5 times. The first time was in 1940. The rulers of Japan wanted to show the might of their empire. The only problem was that it was in 1940. World War II had just broken out. So Japan gave up hosting the Olympics. In Japan's collective memory, however, the 1940 Games are remembered as the Maruboshi no Orumpinku, the Phantom Olympics. 2 decades later, Tokyo made a comeback in an attempt to secure the 1960 Games, but it was no match for Rome's bid. However, the third time proved to be the charm. Tokyo hosted the 1964 Olympic Games. Japan took the opportunity to tell the world that it had become a capitalist democracy. The Japanese capital, which had been reduced to ashes in 1945, emerged as a modern metropolis. New roads and infrastructure, such as the famous bullet train, were built. Those were the first times games were broadcast via satellite, a technological miracle made in Japan. And because these games were such a success, the Japanese were eager to repeat the experience. The problem is that the Olympic spirit has changed a lot. The Games have doubled in size. There are twice as many athletes, twice as many countries, and twice as many competitions. All this means that organizing the Games today means spending a fortune. Roads, hotels, Olympic villages, stadiums, and all of this to be used for just 1 month. The month in which the Games take place. And what happens after that? Well, just ask the Brazilians.
Rio looks apocalyptic a year after the Olympics.
I present to you the reality of the Olympic Games. In the last 3 decades, there has not been a single Olympics that has been profitable. However, little of that has mattered. In 2019, a whopping 90% of Japanese people were excited about the Tokyo 2020 Games. So the yen was never lacking. And believe me, we are talking about a lot of yen. The initial budget was $7.3 billion, but the organising committee officially acknowledged that these figures had risen to $12.6 billion. The postponement and preventative measures against COVID-19 added another $2.8 billion to make the final bill $15.4 billion. However, a Japanese government audit estimated the total investment to be more than $28 billion with a B. This audit includes infrastructure spending that studies such as Oxford University exclude because they consider them to be investments that Japan would have to undertake sooner or later. In this sense, the Beijing Games, along with the Winter Games organised by Russia and Sochi, take the gold medal as the most expensive in history. But if we stick to the cost of organising the Games, the preparation for those weeks of sporting competition, Tokyo has no rival. They went all out because these Games were Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's big gamble. An opportunity to tell the world that after decades of economic stagnation and natural disasters, Japan was back.
It would be a tremendous honor for us to host the Games in 2020 in Tokyo, one of the safest cities in the world. Now and in 2020, some may have concerns about Fukushima. Let me assure you, the situation is under control.
Another goal for the government was to demonstrate that Japan has not fallen behind the United States or China in terms of technology. For decades, Japan had been the benchmark when it came to computers, televisions, and video games. Now, they wanted to use the Olympics to set a new technological milestone in Olympic history. The problem is that I doubt that many of you even noticed it.
NHK to broadcast 200 hours of Tokyo Olympics in 8K.
Indeed, the Japanese public television station spent a lot of money to offer 8K broadcasts. The only problem? Hardly anyone owns an 8K television. So few people noticed the quality of the broadcasts. Money down the drain. But wait a minute, because the story gets even worse. Check this out.
Game over for Suga.
Akira is one of the most mythical Japanese comics in history. The otakus who are watching this video need not for me to explain what it is. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it is a comic published in 1982, but set in 2019. In the comic, the city of Neo-Tokyo is about to hold the Olympic Games. And the truth is that Akira's dystopian portrayal of the event corresponds pretty closely to reality.
Olympics to be held under Tokyo's fourth coronavirus state of emergency.
It is clear that these games were unique. To begin with, they have been held in 2021, the first time they've been held in an odd-numbered year. And all of this effort only to have health restrictions ultimately prevent the public from being in the stands. Even so, Shinzo Abe's successor, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, remained determined to hold the games at all costs. And all of this, despite the fact that the pandemic is causing almost 10,000 deaths worldwide every day. Nevertheless, Japan insisted on hosting the Olympic Games, even though they knew they were not going to make it profitable. A decision more difficult to understand than the ending of Akira. This one goes out to you, my dear otakus. What's more, in order to organize the games, they had to put the most bizarre restrictions in place. And take note, because this is where the story heats up. Or rather, the opposite?
Alcohol allowed, but no condom distribution in Tokyo Olympic Village.
That's right. Condoms have been handed out in the Olympic Village since 1988. Think about it. Athletes are young people with exceptionally good bodies and testosterone running wild. Come on, they probably have some high voltage parties. But during the time of COVID, it seems no condoms. I mean, wouldn't it have been easier to postpone the Olympics for another year? I mean, I'm not the only one saying this. That is what the majority of Japanese citizens thought as well. 40% called for a further postponement. Another 40% wanted Tokyo to abandon the games altogether. Think about it. While the Japanese had to endure a lot of ongoing restrictions, they had to see 50,000 athletes from almost 200 different countries coming into the country. And all this because... Japan has handled COVID-19 pretty well. It has 126 million people with a noticeably aging population. And yet, deaths have hovered around 17,000 since the start of the pandemic. These figures are largely due to the seriousness with which the Japanese respected the restrictions. However, on the 20th of August, 12 days after the closing ceremony, there was almost 26,000 positive cases. It was the day with the highest number of infections since the pandemic began. And some will think, well, they must have made a profit, right? The event was expected to create 2 million jobs and have a positive effect on the Japanese economy of $128 billion thanks to investment, tourism, and increased consumption. And yes, many of you will think that these forecasts are always inflated, but the actual result has been close to zero. They couldn't even sell a single ticket. The big Japanese companies didn't make a profit either. They spent a total of $3.6 billion on advertising. But the public was so annoyed that Toyota pulled all of its advertising related to the games despite being a major sponsor of the IOC. So of course, in the end, the legacy of Tokyo 2020 is the bills they've got to pay. And let me remind you of the numbers. $28 billion, of which $15.4 billion is simply the cost of organizing the month-long competition. Well, all but $6.7 billion that is the sum that will come out of the pockets of the Japanese taxpayer. We are talking about billions that could be used to build 300 hospitals or lower taxes. As you can imagine, the unpopularity of the Prime Minister has broken new records. A man for whom there will be no more screens, neither 8K nor regular HD.
Yoshihide Suga to step down as Japan's Prime Minister.
With Suga out of action, his successor will have to face a general election before the end of November. Now, let's see who's going to tell the Japanese that taxes will need to be raised. Because Japan's debt has already reached such colossal proportions that Godzilla looks like a lizard next to it. And many of you will ask yourselves, but does this have consequences for the rest of the world? Well, yes, it does. And we're going to look at that now.
The Olympic flame goes out.
The Olympic Games are a bit like a wedding. A lot of money wasted to then enjoy a moment that goes by very quickly. And pro tip, don't tell your new wife that you use the term wasted. Even so, organising them is the dream of any country. We here at VisualPolitik still remember when Madrid was bidding to host the Olympic Games. You had to be careful about saying that you were against it because everyone would go for your jugular. In the end, Madrid lost to Tokyo, but it left some Spaniards with some great memories. With their impeccable English, the then mayoress of Madrid then tried to persuade the Olympic International Committee. Look what a wonderful job she did.
And I assure you, no one celebrates life like Spanish people do. There is nothing quite like a relaxing cup of café con leche in Plaza Mayor or a quaint romantic dinner in el Madrid de los Austrias.
Many of you may have been wondering what I have against the Olympic Games. Let's see. Regardless of the money involved, the worst thing is having to win over the IOC members. The International Olympic Committee is one of the organisations that gets the best treatment in the world. Every time they visit a candidate city, they get the luxury treatment. And, as has been revealed on several occasions, the beds they provided are not exactly made of cardboard. The IOC expelled several members for corruption in the late 1990s. They had been bought off in order to bring the 2002 Olympics Games to Salt Lake City. But this was not an isolated case. The capital of Utah had adopted this strategy after losing to Nagano in '98. The Japanese contenders had given away computers while the Mormon city handed out candy and cowboy hats. It was also revealed that several IOC members had asked Melbourne's 1996 bid for new cars and paid expenses at the Australian city's best brothels. Melbourne declined and the games were held in Atlanta. As I said before, IOC members do not sleep in cardboard beds. It is clear that there is a certain understanding amongst most athletes in the Olympic Village, but it seems the Olympic Committee members need some pro-convincing, and with a local delegate so that they have no doubts about whether the Games should be held. The problem is that people have already gotten used to the Games being underperformers. The economic failures of Rio or Tokyo are notorious, and the television audiences continue to fall. That's why there is less and less interest in organising the Olympic mega event, and IOC members are getting tired of seeing news stories like this.
Hamburg votes no in 2024 Olympics referendum. Rome Olympics 2024. Mayor Raggi says no. The yes vote to the candidacy is irresponsible.
The IOC suddenly found itself with only two bids to host the 2024 Games, Paris and Los Angeles. Given such an outlook, it opted for a Solomonic decision, Paris 2024 and Los Angeles 2028. So it's clear that something is changing in the Olympic world. They've gone from having several candidacies fighting for the favour of the IOC to seeing how candidacies are presented practically in secret. It's almost as if the IOC is going around the world begging. Hey, how about letting us hold the Games in your city, please? And without the banquets, we have found that we already have a venue for the 2032 Games. There isn't actually a rival, but still, look at the theatrics. They may give it some buzz.
The International Olympic Committee has the honor to announce that the Games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane, Australia.
Two things are clear to me right now. One is that 90% of you just found out about Brisbane. The other is that in order to see who gets to host the Games, the IOC watched the video we did on why Australia is rich. In 11 years' time, when those Games come around, I'm sure you remember VisualPolitik. But in the meantime, the question is over to you. Do you think the Tokyo Games will be remembered as a symbol of achievement or as a catastrophe? Will we have the Games for a long time, or is the Olympic flame in danger of being extinguished for good? And most importantly, what would you offer to the IOC for your city to host the Olympic Games? Keep it PG. We want to know about possible bids, so you can leave your answers in the comments below. And as always, don't forget that we have new videos every week, so subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, let us know by liking it, and we'll see you next time.